Some big news coming out of Lebanon as Israel has agreed to a ceasefire with Hezbollah. The proposal was brokered by the United States. Now, to talk about this in more detail, along with other hot-button issues making the news from around the globe, is our foreign affairs expert Lisa Daftari from the Foreign Desk, who joins us once again from Los Angeles. Lisa, the cessation of hostilities will reportedly unfold in, what, 3 phases? The relocation of Hezbollah operatives to the areas north of the Litani River, the withdrawal of the IDF to within Israel's borders, and the mediation is to take place between Israel and Lebanon to resolve any territorial disputes. Tell me more.
Let's see if this works. I mean, Hal, we know how many times we've been back to the drawing board to get an actual meaningful ceasefire. And number one, to get the hostages back, which will not be brokered in this deal. This is an interesting part of this because obviously that is the priority for Israel. And at the same time, they have not been able to get Hezbollah to agree to something that would have a clause that would allow Israel to defend itself if it saw the need to defend itself. What is interesting is that the United States did broker this and will be the one to find a third-party mediator to oversee this ceasefire. So a lot of chefs in the kitchen, and that doesn't always make for a great recipe. So we shall see if this does actually work. But step number one is that within the last 12 hours, we have everyone on board for now to move forward with these 3 phases of this ceasefire.
Could this potentially work out long term, or is this really a short-term solution?
We know that every time there is some sort of ceasefire, whether it's between Hamas and Israel, whether it's between Hezbollah and Israel, whether it's between the Palestinian Islamic Jihad and Israel, they always seem to go back to just, recalibrating and coming back. This is a way of life for terrorists. And I think that's what is lost within the mainstream media. That is what's lost among academics. That's what's lost among the encampments at the universities, where many of the students believe that they're doing the right thing and are standing behind the right social justice movement of their time, and not understanding that, yes, the Palestinians are poor, downtrodden, but whose fault is that? And how can the Palestinians have a better life? Is killing a Jew in Memphis that was just happened over the weekend, will that save the Palestinian people? Will abducting a rabbi and killing him in the United Arab Emirates, will that do anything for the Palestinian people? So, this anti-Semitism has been pushed in there as a way of really justifying a social justice movement that makes no sense. The root of the problem will always be there, and that is terrorism among the Palestinian territories. And that is what needs to be rooted out. And first and foremost, we have to look at what is fueling that terrorism within the Palestinian territories, and that is, of course, Iran's regime, the Islamic Republic. That's not what's being talked about. And until we get to the root of the problem, we'll just be dealing with its consequences, which is what's happening here. In every single ceasefire, in every, we're playing whack-a-mole by getting rid of each one of these issues with each one of the proxies that the Islamic Republic is funding. But until we get to the Islamic Republic, there will be no end to terrorism in the region.
Yeah, Lisa, we'll talk about the death of the rabbi in just a moment here, but let's talk also, prior to the ceasefire, a number of Israelis were hurt as the terrorist group Hezbollah recently fired 250 rockets into the northern part of Israel.
Right. And you know what? We've been talking about, the technology that Israel has to block so many of these missiles, but that shouldn't be a justification for, well, nothing happened, now let's look the other way. Hundreds of missiles have been coming in from Hezbollah, by the way, from October 8th, the day after this war started, until now. And, a broken clock is right twice a day. So we are seeing some casualties. We are seeing some of these get through and not be blocked by the various technologies that Israel has to block missiles. And it's very expensive. It's very, it's terrorism. You're causing shock. You're causing trauma. You look at the children that have to live in these war-torn areas on both sides. And of course, within Israel, it's, the casualties aren't as high. So we overlook the fact that these missiles keep raining down. It's just something that will continue and has continued since the last war to this one. So until Israel retaliates, we don't hear about the missiles that are just being lobbed into Israel on a daily basis. And here you have a few casualties that are now being reported.
And speaking of which, Lisa, officials with the United Arab Emirates announced that 3 people have been arrested in connection with the murder of the Abu Dhabi-based Rabbi Kogan. Now, the ministry described Rabbi Kogan as a Moldovan citizen.
Yes, so he is an Israeli Moldovan citizen. He is a Chabad emissary. Chabad is a very interesting organization. They do great work around the world. They send their rabbis and create centers around the world so that they can, explain Judaism, and they can have Sabbath dinners. And this is for people who live in these places or people who are tourists in these places. And ever since the Abraham Accords, there was a Chabad and many other synagogues, by the way, in the United Arab Emirates, which has been called the safest place, by many different lists. That is the safest place, city, many superlatives, and of course has been a safe place for Jews ever since the Abraham Accords were signed in 2020. And here you have a very targeted attack on the rabbi there by these 3 Uzbeki men who abducted the rabbi, killed the rabbi. His body was found, and then they fled off Turkey, but they were arrested right away. Now, the Iran regime was, through social media channels, we believe that they took responsibility at first, and then it was not that they took responsibility, and now they're denying responsibility. So it's been back and forth over the weekend, but we can take a guess as to who pulls the puppet strings and why they would target a symbolic Jewish figure in the United Arab Emirates. This is a horrific thing to happen, and I think this shouldn't be taken lightly. This was a young rabbi who had nothing to do with the war going on in the Middle East. His only crime was to be born a Jew. And to dedicate his life to the clergy. This really sets a frightening tone for Jewish tourists, people living anywhere in the United States, in Canada, in Europe, around the world. I know there has been many threats issued for Thailand, for a lot of the Israelis who go there on vacation. This is not the way to live in fear.
Lisa, politicians here in Canada have condemned a number of anti-Semitism attacks and rallies that took place in Montreal. Pro-Palestinian protesters have been smashing windows at the local convention center. Local businesses were destroyed, ignited smoke bombs, and even set 2 cars on fire. Now, these protests are increasing in number, and many would argue are simply getting out of control all across North America.
Right, across North America. And Hal, as you outlined, these are not peaceful protests. This is not an exercise in free speech. And that is what is lost again by the media, by those who are covering this. To damage property in a place where you live, I mean, what kind of respect are you showing towards it's your own. It's your own. If you're living in Montreal and you truly want to make a point, you write letters, you petition, you protest peacefully, you make your voice heard, you write to the United Nations, you do what you want. But to damage property, to attack Jews, to attack reporters, to attack the police, which is happening all over. I mean, we can understand why this is a manifestation of what's going on in the Middle East. This is their own westernized version of terrorism. They are trying to terrorize the people around them, whether it's on a college campus, whether it's against Western reporters, whether it's against the police. They are trying to instill fear, and through violence, by the way. It has to be stopped. I think there was a juxtaposition of the video footage in Montreal, where you saw these violent protesters, and then side by side that you saw Justin Trudeau dancing at the Taylor Swift concert, I believe. So, look. I'm not saying he shouldn't go to a concert. I'm saying that there has to be swift action. There has to be a forceful voice of deterrence that says this is not something we're going to stand for in our country. Look, it's first they come for the Jews, they say, right? And then they come for everyone else. This is not something that anyone should take lightly. If you are a champion of social justice, then you should understand that this is pure anti-Semitism. And it's any racism of any kind, any bigotry of any kind. If it's tolerated against one group, it'll be tolerated against everyone. And we're setting a very, very dangerous precedent here in the North, in North America in general.
And Lisa, a gunman was killed and 3 Jordanian police were injured following a shooting near the Israeli embassy in Amman on Sunday. The gunman, armed with an automatic weapon, opened fire on police and as they were patrolling in the neighborhood, a strong Jewish neighborhood where the embassy is located.
Right, wherever the Israeli embassies are located, there is danger right now. We saw this throughout Europe in a few different instances. Just over the weekend, we saw it again at London at the Israeli embassy there. Here in Los Angeles at the Israeli embassy, there are protests that are happening all throughout the week. Sometimes getting violent, often putting red paint all over the property. Again, this is not peaceful protesting. So it's something that I know that all eyes and ears are open. I know synagogues have to increase their security. I know that the Holocaust museums here in Los Angeles are also increasing their security. Again, not a way to live when you live in the United States or when you are a representative of a country as a diplomat. It's really no way to live.
Yeah, you shouldn't have to live on eggshells, absolutely, especially in our communities. Lisa, officials with the Islamic Republic in Iran say that they will engage in nuclear discussions mediated by the European Union with, I believe, Germany, France, and the UK in Geneva this Friday. But not only will they talk about nuclear, they'll also be discussing the wars taking place in the Middle East.
Yes, well, the clock is absolutely ticking, and it looks like the government to be most scared about a Donald Trump presidency seems to be the Islamic Republic, the mullahs that are ruling Iran right now, and we see them trying to really get some sort of treaty, some sort of nuclear deal, some sort of deal with the Europeans, mostly because they are fearful of economic pressure in the form of sanctions that will cut off their ability to sell weapons and oil and collect money from the central bank systems. This is deterrence. I mean, Donald Trump didn't even get into the White House yet, and he is already instilling fear among those who have run circles around the White House and will continue to do so. Now, the Iran regime is trying to get these meetings, obviously before January 20th, trying to really make something happen. And of course, they kind of bring the Europeans in under this shroud of we care about human rights, about the Palestinians, and about the war. By the way, this is the war that they started, they funded, and they are responsible for. So every death is on them. Now they want to come to the negotiating table and make sure that they are able to sell their weapons and continue spinning those centrifuges. And this is what the mullahs do. Whenever they feel as though they're going to be under pressure, they try to make some fake concessions that will fool the acronymed organizations like the UN, like the EU, and they bring everyone together and say, oh, we're so worried, but we will work together with you. This is what we're going to do. Meanwhile, we saw the same thing with the JCPOA, which was the nuclear deal that was brokered by the Obama administration. And it was the same. We're going to be on our best behavior. We're going to do this. We're going to do that. And guess what? The centrifuges continued to spin and the cameras were shut off and they continued to engage in their bad behavior, funding of the proxies, their egregious human rights violations, and those same acronymed organizations that claim to care about children and claim to care about women looked away when they were killing Iranian children and killing Iranian women and gouging their eyes out and raping them and hanging them. And here we go. The world is a very, very crazy place where there's a lot of hypocrisy, particularly when it comes to politics and human rights.
Police in London, England conducted a controlled explosion on Friday after discovering a suspicious package near the U.S. Embassy. The embassy, Lisa, built in 2018, has been considered one of the most modern and secure diplomatic compounds in the world.
Right, secure, but still under threat. This is what's going on. These are the cities of the world that we're seeing a lot of the pro-Palestinian, anti-American, anti-West protests and anti-UK and anti-French and you fill in the blank, but these are taking over Europe. These are mostly, for the most part, migrants who emigrated to these places and now are fueling these fires. And of course, you have all the useful idiots that follow in suit as well. But this is what we're seeing, a fixation on targeting American assets, Israeli assets, and of course, burning the flags of the countries that they live in. So wake up call to all the natives, wake up call to all of those who have allowed these individuals to come in and really change the dynamic, change the narrative. And when we see those American flags, I know here, I know you guys see the Canadian flags being burned, we see the American flags being burned. That is just a punch to the gut when you see that. It really does silence their narrative for many Americans that understand that this is not something that is a social justice or humanitarian movement. It is purely anti-American, purely anti-Canadian, and it's going to take a long time to put out these fires. It's truly disappointing, to say the least.
She's our foreign affairs expert and host of the Foreign Desk in Los Angeles, Lisa Daftari. Thanks again for your time today.
My pleasure.